Today I'm going to be showing you how we're going to create these beautiful macaroons from wool roving and these beautiful new beads, the Cylin beads from John Bead. Let's get started. I'm going to be using an 8-inch embroidery hoop with this fabric. This is from my stash. I'm trying to remember exactly what fabric it is and I can't. It is a linen blend. You can see the weave is slightly, it's a little bit more open than just a pure like quilting cotton fabric. A quilting cotton will also work just fine. So you just want a nice fabric that's going to be a good background for your piece. I've used, I don't know that I'd go any more open weave than this sort of fabric. So you can see, I'll show it really close. You can see like the weave here, and with a quilting cotton that would be a little bit tighter. So this is the type of fabric that you're going to want to use for the felting. Let's talk about the wool roving that you will need for this project. So I have various sizes of roving here. I have different packages. This is from a company, Meaningful Crafts, that I bought at a fabric store. I liked this one because it had 5 different colors and smaller amounts of the wool roving. This was just a pretty color that I picked, so you can see it's a little bit larger. These were smaller bits. I can't even remember where I got them from. I just like the colors. So this is what I'm going to be using. This is from Storyteller Stitchery, and it's a hand-dyed roving. And for the macaroons, this is absolutely perfect. It's more than I will need. I'm telling you right now, this is a lot of roving. I'm only doing, the pattern is, I think 5 macaroons. So this is going to be more than enough, plus some for another project at some time. I have all of the different colors throughout this, and I'm just going to be able to pull little bits of them. Working with a solid color one is super easy as well. You can also mix your own colors, which I talk about that in my latest book, mixing the colors of roving. But an amount about like this is also more than enough. So if you were buying a pack of roving that's like multiple colors, that would also be plenty of roving for a project like this, because you're working on small little like macaroon shaped bits. You don't need tons of roving for that, but you do need colors that you like and that match the beads that you're working with. And so I was thinking about that as I went through the different beads. I'm not sure what beads I'm using yet, but I know that all of these colors here match the roving colors here. And so it's going to be easy to blend them together with my project. The beads that I'm going to be using for this project are the brand new Cylin beads. These are a size 11 seed bead. They're a cylinder. I'm going to try and show this to you so there's not the glare from my light. I can also show you in my bead tray how tiny and delicate they are. These are a beautiful bead to work with. They work really good with the embroidery threads that I'm going to talk about, and I highly recommend adding these to your macaroons. Other beads that are optional, these are the sequin and beads kit, and I'm using these primarily for the sequins that are included in the kit, but there's lots of other options, and you can jazz up your macaroons however you see fit. So this is optional, but I am going to show you how I add the sequins from this kit to my pattern. These are the threads that you'll see me using. So this is the Good Thread by John Bead. It's a white thread. Well, I'm using the white, and it's very thin, great for beading, great for everything that you're going to see me doing today. And I'm also going to be using Wonderfil's Fruity threads, and I'll explain the difference of these later on, but this is a 12-weight thread that's also really good for beading and adding accents throughout your piece. For the needle felting, this is what I'm going to be using. So this is it's Wool Buddy. This is my felting mat. You can see I've used it a lot, all the different felt colors. This is made of wool. It's pretty firm, and it is what you're going to be placing your piece on to do the felting. Again, more about that when we get to it. This is the Clover. It's a pen style felting tool. It has 2 of the needles, and I like this size and this type because of the fineness of the pattern and the close little details that we're going to be adding. Additional notions that you'll need, I have a variety of embroidery needles. Because I'm going to be using bugle beads, I just want to make sure that my needles will fit through the smaller size of the bugles. I have my school glue for finishing and a pair of scissors. You are also going to need the pattern and something to transfer it with. I am using, this is the Clover water erasable marker, and you'll need a light source, whether that's a light box or a window, something with light to transfer your pattern. So we are going to begin by transferring the pattern. Now, I feel like I show you videos all the time where everything works out perfectly and I have my light that I trace my pattern from. Well, what happens when something breaks and you don't have a replacement? My light board that I always use, that I absolutely love, is not working. And I really want to transfer this pattern. So I'm going to show you an alternate way for if you're in a pinch like me, or if you don't have a nice light board, what you can do. Besides using a window, if you had a window, you could absolutely do that. But here's just a different way to transfer a pattern. So I have cut the pattern out from the larger sheet of paper. Here's my hoop, and my fabric is all hooped up. I'm going to flip it upside down, and I'm placing the pattern in the hoop. And then I'm going to grab a piece of washi tape, and I'm just going to tape it to the back of the pattern. Just 2 or 3 pieces to hold it in place so that you can see the pattern through the fabric. So my pattern is on my fabric, and now I'm grabbing a hoop that is slightly larger. This is a hoop that I use for like hands-free embroidery projects. It raises it up higher. And I also have just a little light. If this could be a book light, any other light source, and I'm going to place it under my hoop. So I'm making my own light box now. And I'm going to turn my light off so that we can actually see what I'm transferring. So I can see my pattern, I have my transfer pen, and now I'm just going to slowly transfer the pattern onto the fabric. You could definitely do this with a window. It is very dark all week. It's been super dark and stormy, and I just wanted to come up with a way to do this at my desk and show you some alternative methods for pattern transfer. Normally, when transferring a pattern, I would have you take it out of the hoop because you're going to get nice, clean lines working out of the hoop. But this way is working just as well. And when it's all done, I can take it out of the hoop and re-look at my lines and make sure that everything did actually transfer the way that I wanted it to transfer. So looking at it now, I can see that this didn't transfer all the way, and so I'm just going to go over any of the lines that I need to be a little darker, and I can edit things that way. You can use your pattern as the guide. And just freehand it. Once your pattern has been transferred, you are going to keep it in the hoop, and I like to tighten the fabric in the hoop all the way around before we get started with felting. You want it to be nice and tight in the hoop so that you have a good surface to felt on. You're also going to grab your felting mat, your felting needle, and your wool roving, which is just so beautiful. Depending on where you get yours from, you might have yours sectioned out in colors. Mine is a mixed skein of thread, but I can pick and choose where I want to grab my wool from, which is what I'm going to be doing for this project. I'm going to have each macaroon a slightly different color, and I have lots of variety with this skein of roving. So I'm just going to start probably, I really like this teal that blends into a gray, and so I think I'm going to start with some of that. And so I'm just going to start by, again, depending on what kind of roving you have, yours might be in little balls, it might be like this. You're just going to start gently pulling some of the roving from this skein or from the ball, whatever it is that you're working with. And I just like to have a decent amount like this as I'm getting started. Now, if you've never felted before, this is very sharp. The felting needles, if you look at them super closely, you'll notice there's little tiny barbs on them, which make them nice and sharp. And that's what starts to make the roving attached to the fabric. As you're punching the needle up and down and back and forth, it's those little barbs are catching on the wool and they're adding it to the fabric. And that's the process that we're going to be working on now. So I like to, so in saying that, just be careful. You don't want to jab this into your finger. And I like to lay my wool mat so that I can feel it right under where I'm going to be working. And it's easy to do this in a hoop. I love this size mat because it's so easy to work in a hoop like this. I'm going to pull out the purple because I don't really want purple in this one. I really want just the gray and the teal. And now I'm just going to get started. This is a really fun process. As you work on it, you're going to enjoy it even more. So I kind of start like around the edges, and I'm just gently poking the needle and the felt and the wool. And I'm just making sure that I'm staying within the lines of the pattern. So this is a fairly large shape that we're filling, or a fairly large space that we're filling. And you can decide to do it. I like to fill the whole area before making sure that all of the space is covered with the roving. So I kind of like go around the edges, and I'm just lightly punching this into place right now. I'm not making the first layer perfect. I just want to be within the boundary of the area that I'm filling. And so you're just going to grab a little bit more. I like to just work with small bits of this. And you can see I'm just kind of laying it over this area enough so that I can see the area I'm filling in. And as I'm working, I'm just kind of like grabbing it with the needle, and I twirl it around a little bit. You'll find as you work on a project like this, every project will be different depending on how much you want to felt to this. So I could just really lightly felt it into place and make sure that it's through the fabric and have a fluffier looking macaroon. I don't want mine too fluffy. I do want it to be the macaroon shape. I want it to have some texture, but not tons of texture. You can see as I'm working, I'm just kind of making sure any little wisps of the fiber I'm getting in here. And periodically, as you are doing this, you just want to, you're going to see that, I'm going to flip this over, this mat gets slightly attached to the fibers. And so I'm just gently peeling it off. And I do that a lot as I'm working on a project like this. You don't want to felt something and not remove it from the felted mat until the very end, because then there are so many fibers. I like to just do that a few times as I'm working on it. I'm just always making sure that it's not being felted to the mat. And then this is the process. I'm just going to keep going with this. I love this blend of colors so much. And so I'm going to make sure that as I'm taking off the roving, I'm getting it from this section that I really like the colors. And I'm just gently peeling off pieces of the roving. And this is how I'm just going to keep adding to this. So once your whole outline is filled in, you can now go back and really precisely do the needle felting. And so this is where I'm just going all throughout the piece. And this is the process. This is I find this a very relaxing part of the process. And so sometimes I will just make sure that I get each of these roughly filled out and outlined, and then I can just sit and needle felt until I'm happy with how it looks. But I wanted to at least show you the very first beginnings of this process. And again, you're just going to be felting it until you are happy with how it looks. I also find that sometimes after I have felted something, I need to let it sit for a few hours, and you're going to notice that all of the little holes kind of disappear and it starts to look full. You just need to give it time to sit. Every single time I do a project like that, that's what I notice. So if you're not sure whether you've added enough or you're not sure if you like how it looks, I really do suggest just set it aside for a few hours. Maybe get all of the macaroon tops and bottoms felted, which is what I'm going to do, and then let it sit overnight and take a look at it in the morning, or just let it sit for an hour or so and see if there's areas that you need to be filling in, or if you're happy with it, and then we'll move on from there. So right now I am just going to finish this piece, and then I'm going to add the same color to the bottom, and then I'm going to alternate colors all throughout just so that I have the macaroons felted in place. Here's what it will look like when you are done felting. Look at that fluffy little stack of macaroons. I love this part. I love the part of seeing the design that is just finished in felt, and then knowing that I'm going to go back and add other details. I like to add detailing around the outer edges, but I usually wait until the very end to do that. So that's what we're going to do. And now we're going to focus on the middle sections and the beading. So for the 3 sections of each macaroon that we have left, I am going to be using the Cylin beads. So these are cylinder seed beads. You can see they're very tiny. They're size 11. They're going to line up perfectly though in these sections. So I have 3 colors picked out for each of the macaroons, with the 2 that are the same. So I have 2 that are teal, I have 2 that are pinker, and then I have 1 that's the purple. I'm going to kind of mix and match the beads. So this, in my head, this is what we're starting with for the green, and then for the pink ones, and then for the purple one. So I've got all my beads, and I'm going to grab my good thread, and then we're going to start beading. I always suggest testing your needle with your beads before you thread the needle, but especially when you are using a very small size 11, that's important. You don't want to get to the point where you've threaded your needle and it's a fine needle, and then you go to put your bead on and it doesn't pass over the end of the needle. So always test that before you thread your needle, just to make sure that it's going to work. I've threaded my needle and I like to tie a knot at the end just to secure everything. I'm working with a slightly open weaved fabric, and so the knot is going to be important to ensure that I don't pull the thread all the way through my project as I start my embroidery. And I am going to start with this section right along here with the teal colored beads. And I believe I can get 2 little beads per row. So I'm putting my bead on the needle, and then I'm just going to take it down through the fabric. And the first stitch, especially on a slightly more open fabric that you stitch, you don't want to pull it too hard because you don't want to pull your needle and thread through the fabric, which can sometimes happen with a more open fabric weave. And now I'm just going to be lining the beads up. So in this section here, the small section of macaroon, I'm going to be able to get 2, sometimes 3 beads stacked throughout here. And so I'm just going to line them up in little rows and work my way from the left to the right, adding the beads. You're going to want your beads nice and close together so that they lay flat. And you'll be able to adjust the beads as you go along. You'll be able to adjust how many beads are stacked together. Because these are tiny, I want them to fill this section. And so I'm just going to be very aware of how many beads I'm using so that it looks nice and full. It's a very methodical sort of process. You're not going fast when you're working with beads this tiny, so you have time to make little adjustments. And I find this a very relaxing part of the process. So I'm just going to keep stitching my macaroon with these teeny tiny little Cylin beads. As you are stitching, I want to give you a little tip with the threads that you're using. So I've been using the good thread, which is, as you're stitching with it, it's a white thread, very thin, and you can't see it through the beads. I'm also adding in some of, this is the Wonderfill, this is the Fruity, it's a 12 weight cotton. It's very slightly thicker than the good thread. So you can see side by side, and I don't know if it's coming through on the video, but it's just very, very slightly thicker than the good thread. So it's just as easy to stitch with. You can thread the needle, it goes through the beads good. However, the cool thing about it is that when you're stitching with the slightly opaque beads, using the blue thread, which I've used here, you're going to get like some of the blue thread showing through a little bit. And so it gives you some gradient in the color of the beads. So if you like the look of that, which I really do, and I like how it just gives a little bit of variety using all one color bead, just switching up the thread really makes a difference. You can see over here, I used a green thread throughout here. And the thread is only showing through the beads just a tiny bit, but what you're really getting is the thread shining through the opaque beads. I used the pink throughout here. In this one, I'm going to be using a purple thread. So it's really fun when you're using all of the same type of bead to show a little bit of variety through the threads that you're going to use. And here's what it will look like when you have finished beading the macaroons. Look how amazing these beads look, all lined up in rows on the macaroons. I absolutely love this pattern with these beads. So the next thing that I normally do when I'm done something like this, because we are working with delicate beads, delicate colors, when we transferred the blue, or when I transferred the blue lines on for the pattern, you can still see a little remnant in certain spots of that blue line. Now, what I used was the Clover water soluble marker. And so just with a little Q-tip with some water on it, I'm going to go all along and just wet the lines, and they start to disappear. So depending on what you used to mark your pattern lines, if it just kind of brushes off, or if you need to use water like I'm doing, that's what I normally do next. I like to see that it really starts to look complete before I do any finishing touches on the hoop. And then I just let it dry. It doesn't take very long to dry, but I do like to let it dry, and then I take a picture of it to see if sometimes through the picture, some of the blue lines that I might have missed will show up when I look at it on my phone rather than looking at the hoop. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure all of my markings have disappeared from the fabric. So I like to give you other options for adding to the pattern, like you can see I did right here. So with the needle felting and the beading, you could finish there and be done with your project, call it a day. You spend a long time beading with these tiny little beads, so that would be great, and it looks really good. If, though, you've seen my work, you know that I can't resist adding a little extra sparkle. And look how that right along here just sparkles from a distance when you see it. So I am using the Sequins and Beads kit, and from this kit I'm using the very tiniest of sequins. I love this kit. I love the three sizes of sequins that are included, and these tiny ones are nice and opaque. So they're a blue tint when they're in here in like a quantity of them, but when I actually put them on the felted wool, you can see that they don't really look blue. They just pick up all the colors that are already in the macaroon. So the way that I add these, very easy. I'm using my good thread, and I just have my needle threaded. I'm going to bring it up through the felt, and I'm going to put a sequin on my needle, and then I take it right down around where I brought the needle up. And what I like about adding sequins to felt, or to the wool felt that we did, the sequin kind of like tucks inside all the little fibers of the felt. So they could be nestled on top of the felt, or they're like nestled within the felted macaroon that we've created. And again, that's just how easy it is, putting the sequin on the needle and then just taking the needle back down right about where you came up. And you can add a few of these, you can add more than I'm adding. I just like to, again, if you know my work, you know I love to boho it up, and adding sparkles and shiny things in the form of beads and sequins is one of my favorite methods for beading and embroidering. So I'm going to tuck a few of these throughout the macaroons. So when you've added your little accents, if you're adding those, you'll notice, or you may have noticed throughout this whole piece, that there's a lot of blank space here, along the sides. And you can decide like that's how you want your piece to end, and you can skip ahead to the finishing part and not do anything more. What I like to do with my embroidery pieces is add movement. So right now, before I added all of this that I'll talk about, it was just the macaroons sitting on a piece of fabric. But I really want, when you're looking at it, to have your eye move throughout the hoop. And so the movement is important to me, and it's something that I always add to my pieces. So for instance, I'm going to show you how I added movement to this. These are my sprinkles, I'm calling them, just my little like confetti pieces that give this piece some movement. And I kind of have it swooping down through here. I'm leaving this area and this area blank. And I'm going to have a little bit coming through here and maybe a few pieces up through here, just so that when you look at it, it doesn't look like just a static piece, you know, a bunch of macaroons sitting on a piece of fabric. I really want there to be some sort of movement in the piece. So let me show you how I added these to the fabric. So I have my movement here, and I just want to continue it and have it go towards the edge of the hoop in this area. I am using my sequins and beads kit, and I've chosen colors that blend really well with the background. I didn't want to add the movement here and here and have it stand out, because I really do want the macaroons to be the focal point of this. So I chose the colors that matched well with my background so that it just adds a little bit of dimension. You notice it a little bit, but it's not taking your eye away from the complete pattern. So when you're working with your piece, because there is a lot of open space on this, think about what you want to do with your background. Don't forget about the background of your piece. So I'm just bringing my needle up in this area, and this is just going to be a matter of adding little bits and seeing how I feel about it. So I added the beads and the sequins in groups of threes throughout this piece. And so I like to work in odd numbers, and it helped me to figure out where I was going with everything, to just have like three little sequins, or I'm sorry, three little bugles, and then, oh, I need three little more bugles here. And it makes it not feel overwhelming to add to a piece when you're looking at it in terms of I'm adding three of something. So I'm just putting the bugle bead on the needle and scattering where I'm going to be adding these beads. I added all of the bugles, and then once I was happy with the placement of those, I went and added the sequins. The sequins are added in the same way. Let me just add this last bugle. So you can see I'm just laying it down on the fabric and bringing my needle down right about at the end of that bugle. This thread is great because you really don't see it, even if you extend the thread beyond the bugle bead, it doesn't take your attention away from the beads because it's a nice thin thread. And I'm just going to add a few more bugles. So there's the movement of the bugle beads. And once I have those, I can start adding my sequins. I'm using all three sizes of the sequins, and I am just scattering them throughout the piece. And I'll show you how to add the first one or two, but they're very easy. So I'm just going to pick one of the larger sequins. I put it on my needle, bring it down, and I'm just adding a small stitch to hold it in place. It's that simple. So I'm going to do the same exact thing, scatter a few sequins throughout. When you look at your piece, if you're having trouble deciding whether it's done, I always recommend taking a picture and looking at it through your phone or through your camera rather than looking at the hoop. Step back, look at it through your phone. That will help you see what more do you need to add. So I'm going to finish this area and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take a picture of it and I'm going to see what do I need something here? What do I need to add to make it feel like a complete piece? So I always recommend that before you're finishing up a project. Take a picture of it, look at it, and see what needs to be added. Okay, so you've added your background if you want to, your movement, you've finished your pattern, and now you are ready to completely finish your hoop. So the last thing that I do is I'm just going to lightly stretch the fabric to make sure that it's nice and tight. I don't want any wrinkles, but I also want to be careful that I'm not stretching the pattern out at all and making it weird. So I'm just very gently going all around and just making sure that the fabric is tight in the hoop. And then I give it one last tighten at the hardware. And now I'm going to trim it. I don't want to have my fabric so that when I fold it over, it's touching the back of the hoop, especially with a fabric that is more neutral. You would definitely see that from the back. You can see already where the fabric is touching the back of the fabric. So when you're using a more neutral fabric, if you are like I am, you don't want that. So I'm going to trim it all the way around just so that it's about 1/4 to 1/2 inch that you're leaving. When you fold over your fabric, you don't want it touching the back. And now I'm going to flip it to the back. I have my white school glue, and I am just going to run a strip of glue all the way around the hoop. You just want enough. You don't want the glue to be dripping over the sides. You want it to be enough that when you fold the fabric over, you'll see that the glue holds the fabric in place. And for a hoop this size, I run the glue the whole way around first, and then I start to fold the fabric. And now you just pick an area and start folding. And you can see that as I'm doing this, the fabric is already staying in place. So it doesn't really take much, especially with a lighter weight fabric like this. If you're ever doing a project and you are working on a fabric that is much thicker, an upholstery fabric or a decor fabric, you're gonna need to, when you do this process, I usually use Wonder Clips to hold the back fabric over until it really dries. But this is the method that I use for finishing all of my hoops. I like that it makes a nice clean edge on the back. And I never have to worry about the fabric coming off. In fact, when I try to reuse hoops, if I'm tired of a project and I want to start a new one and I get rid of a project or I fold it up and put it away, it is very tricky to remove the fabric from the hoop. So this really is going to hold it in place for you. And then when you get to the end, you're just going to let it dry before you hang it up or before you do anything else with it. I'm just going to let this dry. My piece is dry. Look at these beautiful hoop guts. Even the hoop guts of this piece, I love looking at. I love the fluff of the needle felting. And let's flip it over and see our finished piece. How much fun is this? It really is a joyful pattern. It feels like warm weather and excitement and joy. I love these macaroons. I love how the beads turned out with them. And so my finishing touch now, I am just going to take a piece of, I have this beautiful, it was a sari ribbon. So I'm just going to cut a piece of this about like that. And I'm going to tie it at the top. And that is what I'm going to hang my piece with. Just like that. I'm going to tie a little knot. Cut off this little frayed bit here. And now I have a beautiful piece. You can see there's my ribbon. A beautiful piece to hang and remind me of summertime and happiness and joy. I hope that you really enjoyed stitching this. If you do stitch this pattern, I'd love to see the colors that you choose for your macaroons and also how you stitch your background fabric. So be sure to tag me, and happy stitching!